rugged coastline of Cornwall is currently bearing the brunt of Storm Ingrid, a catastrophic weather event that has surpassed all meteorological predictions for the winter of 2026. With wind gusts clocking at an unprecedented 105 miles per hour at Gwennap Head, the storm has plunged the region into a state of emergency, severing vital transport links and leaving thousands of households in darkness. Storm Ingrid underwent explosive cyclogenesis, frequently termed a bomb cyclone, as it swept across the Atlantic. By the time it reached the southwestern tip of England, its central pressure had plummeted, creating a pressure gradient that unleashed hurricane-force winds. The Met Office issued a rare red weather warning for Cornwall, advising residents that there is a significant danger to life from flying debris and monumental coastal flooding. The most dramatic scenes are unfolding along the seafronts of Penzance, St. Ives, and Mousehole. A combination of a high spring tide and a massive storm surge has seen waves topping 40 feet, crashing over seawalls. In Penzance, the iconic Jubilee Pool has suffered structural damage as the Atlantic Ocean breached its outer defenses. The promenade, usually a scenic walkway, is currently submerged under a mixture of seawater, sand, and hazardous debris. Local authorities have cordoned off the entire seafront, but reports indicate that several basement flats have been completely inundated. As of Saturday evening, National Grid reports that over 45,000 homes across Cornwall are without power. The combination of saturated ground and extreme winds has led to hundreds of fallen trees, which have brought down overhead power lines in rural areas like Bodmin Moor and the Roseland Peninsula. The conditions are too dangerous for our engineers to climb poles at this height of the gale, said a spokesperson for the National Grid. We are monitoring the situation and will deploy teams as soon as wind speeds drop below 45 miles per hour. All Great Western Railway services west of Plymouth have been suspended after a landslide was reported near Teignmouth, and debris blocked the tracks at Redruth. The A30, Cornwall's main artery, is partially blocked by a jackknifed HGV near Launceston. The Tamar Bridge is currently closed to high-sided vehicles, effectively isolating the county from the rest of the UK. All flights from Newquay Airport are grounded, and the Selonian 3 ferry service to the Isles of Scilly has been cancelled for the foreseeable future. Despite the devastation, stories of community resilience are emerging. In Falmouth, volunteer lifeboat crews from the RNLI braved treacherous conditions to rescue a fishing vessel that lost engine power 3 miles off Pendennis Point. Local town halls and community centers in Truro and Camborne have been converted into emergency shelters for those evacuated from flood-prone areas. Volunteers are providing hot meals and blankets, coordinated through the Cornwall Council Emergency Management Portal. While it is too early to calculate the full financial toll, economists suggest that Storm Ingrid could cost the Cornish economy upwards of £150 million. The fishing industry, a cornerstone of the local economy, has seen its fleet harbor-bound for a week, while coastal businesses face a massive cleanup operation just before the anticipated spring tourist season. Meanwhile, the historic harbor of Mousehole, legendary for its resilience, and the Tom Bawcock's Ives spirit, is currently facing its darkest hour in decades. Storm Ingrid, a meteorological behemoth that intensified with terrifying speed over the Atlantic, has struck the village with a combination of hurricane-force winds and a record-breaking storm surge, turning the picturesque harbor into a cauldron of destruction. The disaster began in the early hours of Saturday, January 24, 2026. While Mousehole is protected by massive granite piers, the sheer volume of water pushed by Storm Ingrid's 964 millibar low-pressure center proved too much for the Victorian-era engineering. Witnesses describe a wall of water nearly 45 feet high that eclipsed the South Pier at 3:15 a.m., coinciding with a peak spring tide. The narrow gap of the harbor entrance, designed to break the Atlantic's power, instead created a funnel effect. The iconic wooden balks, Huge timber beams used to seal the inner harbor were splintered like toothpicks within minutes of the primary surge. It didn't sound like wind anymore. It sounded like a continuous freight train crashing into the bedroom wall, said Elias Trewin, a retired fisherman whose family has lived on Mill Pool for 4 generations. By the time I reached the kitchen, the sea was already coming through the floorboards. The main road running alongside the harbor has been pulverized. Massive granite sets, each weighing several hundred kilograms, were ripped from the ground and tossed into the facades of local businesses. The historic Ship Inn, a cornerstone of the community, suffered a catastrophic breach of its ground floor. Seawater and debris have gutted the interior, a scene mirrored across nearly every gallery and cafe lining the North Quay. Although the famous Christmas display had recently been dismantled, the electrical substations that power the village's waterfront were submerged, leading to a total blackout that has now entered its 18th hour. Emergency services have been hampered by the geography of Mousehole itself. The village's famous narrow drangs, alleyways, became wind tunnels, making it impossible for firefighters to deploy high-reach ladders. The Penley lifeboat, operating from nearby Newlyn due to the conditions, has been on constant standby. In a harrowing mission at 5 a.m., the crew successfully rescued 3 residents from a collapsed cottage near the Rock Pool area. The victims were evacuated via the RNLI's specialized flood rescue units, as the road to Penzance was rendered impassable by a landslide at Penley Point. Meteorologists at the Met Office have classified Storm Ingrid as a once-in-a-century event for West Cornwall. The storm underwent explosive cyclogenesis, dropping more than 30 millibars in 24 hours. The unique danger for Mousehole was the wind direction. A sustained south-southwesterly gale pushed the Atlantic's full fetch directly into Mounts Bay. Unlike storms that hit the north coast, like Nuki, Ingrid's trajectory meant there was no landmass to break the momentum of the waves before they hit the village's granite heart. While no fatalities have been officially confirmed within Mousehole, the Southwestern Ambulance Service has treated over 40 individuals for hypothermia and injuries related to flying glass. The Solomon Brown Memorial Hall has been transformed into a makeshift triage and evacuation center. Here, the Cornish spirit is on full display. Locals who escaped the flooding are providing dry clothes and hot tea to those who have lost everything. "We are a village built on the sea, and we know the sea takes its due," says Sarah Penrose, a volunteer at the hall. "But Ingrid is different. This is a level of violence from the weather that our grandfathers never spoke of." The economic impact on Mousehole is expected to be staggering. With the 2026 tourism season approaching, the destruction of the harborfront poses an existential threat to the village's economy. Structural engineers are particularly concerned about the South Pier. Cracks have appeared in the main masonry which, if not repaired immediately, could lead to the harbor's permanent closure to fishing vessels. Cornwall Council has launched an emergency fund, and residents are encouraged to document damage for insurance through the UK government's flood claim portal. Meanwhile, the iconic white sands and turquoise waters of St. Ives have been replaced by a scene of atmospheric violence as Storm Ingrid, the most powerful Atlantic depression of the 2026 season, slammed into the North Cornish coast. With sustained winds of 95 miles per hour and gusts peaking at an astonishing 112 miles per hour at St. Ives Head, the town has been declared a major incident zone by the Devon and Cornwall police. Storm Ingrid reached its peak intensity at approximately 1400 GMT on Saturday, January 24th, 2026. According to data from the Met Office, the storm underwent explosive cyclogenesis, with its central pressure dropping to a staggering 958 millibars. The unique geography of St. Ives, which sits on a peninsula jutting into the Atlantic, left it defenseless against the storm's right front quadrant, the most dangerous part of a cyclone. The resulting storm surge, heightened by a 7.8-meter spring tide, raised the sea level by an additional 1.5 meters, forcing the Atlantic Ocean directly into the town's narrow, historic streets. The most catastrophic damage occurred along the wharf. The historic Smeaton's Pier, which has stood as a guardian of the harbour for centuries, was repeatedly overtopped by green water waves exceeding 50 feet in height. The RNLI St. Ives lifeboat station faced a critical situation when the main doors were buckled by the weight of the surge. Despite the breach, heroic volunteers managed to secure the Shannon-class lifeboat before the slipway became a churning vortex of debris. From the sloop inn to the various art galleries lining the harbour, the ground floors have been completely gutted. The force of the water was so immense that heavy granite benches were ripped from their moorings and hurled through the windows of the Tate St. Ives Gallery, though initial reports suggest the artworks were moved to higher floors in time. The surfing paradise of Porthmeor has been reshaped. The beach cafes, often the crown jewels of the St. Ives tourism industry, have suffered structural failures as the sand beneath them was scoured away by the receding tide. As of late Saturday evening, St. Ives is effectively an island. The A3074, the primary artery into the town, is blocked by a massive fallen Monterey Pine near Carbis Bay and several power lines that remain live. Western Power Distribution, now part of National Grid, has confirmed that over 12,000 properties in the TR26 postcode area are without electricity. The darkness has complicated rescue efforts, as emergency services navigate streets filled with waist-deep water and sharp debris. The St. Ives Bay line has been suspended indefinitely after a section of the track near Lalande Saltings was undermined by coastal erosion, leaving the rail sleepers hanging in mid-air over the rising estuary. The Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service has been working tirelessly to evacuate residents from the Downalong area, the low-lying historic fishing quarter. One particularly harrowing rescue involved a family of 4 trapped in their loft on Back Road West. Using high-stability wading boats, rescuers reached the family just as the staircase below them collapsed. "The wind was screaming so loud we couldn't hear the sirens," said one survivor. "It felt like the house was being shaken by a giant." The St. Ives Guildhall has been opened as an emergency shelter. Local businesses that were not flooded, such as bakeries on the higher ground of the Stenneck, have donated hundreds of pasties and gallons of soup to feed those displaced by the storm. The environmental impact is visible in the vast quantities of microplastics and fishing gear washed up on the shores, but the economic forecast is even grimmer. Analysts suggest that the recovery for St. Ives could cost upwards of £85 million. With the 2026 tourism season just months away, the town faces a race against time to repair its harbour walls and promenade. "This isn't just about cleaning up sand," said a local councillor. "This is about rebuilding the structural integrity of a UNESCO-adjacent heritage site." While the coastal regions of the UK have faced the initial fury of Storm Ingrid, the Midlands is currently grappling with a secondary, more insidious catastrophe. As of Saturday, January 24, 2026, the heart of England has been transformed into a series of disconnected islands. The storm's transition from a coastal surge to an inland deluge has shattered rainfall records, placing the cities of Birmingham, Coventry, Leicester, and Nottingham under a rare amber weather warning, with red warnings active for the Severn and Trent valleys. Storm Ingrid did not weaken as it moved inland. Instead, the storm stalled over the Midlands, trapped between 2 high-pressure systems. This resulted in what meteorologists call orographic enhancement, where the hills of the Peak District and the Shropshire Hills squeezed every drop of moisture from the storm. In the last 24 hours, parts of the West Midlands have received 120 millimeters of rain, nearly double the average monthly rainfall for January. The Met Office has confirmed that wind gusts at the top of the BT Tower in Birmingham reached a staggering 92 miles per hour, causing structural concerns for high-rise buildings across the city centre. The M6 motorway was closed in both directions between Junction 6, Spaghetti Junction, and 10 due to standing water and a jackknifed lorry that succumbed to high crosswinds on the Thelwall Viaduct. The M42 and M5 are also seeing severe delays, with many A roads in rural Derbyshire and Staffordshire completely impassable. Network Rail has issued a do not travel notice. The West Coast Main Line is blocked near Rugby after a landslip deposited tons of earth onto the tracks. Birmingham New Street, the busiest station outside London, is currently a sea of stranded passengers as all services to London, Manchester, and Bristol are cancelled. Birmingham Airport has suspended all flight operations. Crosswinds have exceeded the safety limits for even the largest long-haul aircraft, and several flights have been diverted as far north as Glasgow or across to continental Europe. The Midlands is the center of the UK's manufacturing and automotive sectors, with plants like Jaguar Land Rover in Solihull and Toyota in Derbyshire pausing production due to supply chain breaks and staff safety. The daily economic loss is estimated at £250 million. The Midlands Engine Partnership is already calling for a government emergency recovery package to support businesses affected by the 2026 storm season.